Okay, welcome to the podcast. I am hanging out with my friend Jeff Humphreys. How you doing, buddy?
Good, how are you?
Good. So how does it feel to be on the other side of a podcast?
It's not awkward. It's just very different.
Yeah.
And I think, you and I have hung out a few times, so that awkwardness it's not really a thing.
Yeah.
But like we were just talking about, to know that I'm going to be on the receiving end of a lot of questions that's the awkward part for me.
No, and like I said, interject and start asking me questions anytime because I'm sure you'll have some. So you're a podcast host. Your podcast is called the Calgary Sessions, and then you're also a founder of Shortline Creative. Is that?
That's it.
I got that. I got that correct.
Yep. Check.
Cool, man. So I want to start off with the podcast. The Calgary Sessions podcast. The tagline being artists, athletes, entrepreneurs. Were you going for AAA and you just didn't realize that entrepreneur started with an E? Is that you kind of fucked that up a little bit?
I'm not that thoughtful, so I would have connected all those dots.
So why? I guess first of all, why Calgary Sessions? You're born and raised Calgarian, right?
Born and raised, and so Calgary's just kind of been like it's my everything. It's my home base. It's kind of everything. So the story's a little long-winded. Back in 2003, I started a website called calgarysoul.com.
Okay.
And calgarysoul.com was this online community where I was starting to DJ. So I knew I needed to create a brand. I needed a place where I could put my music.
Yeah.
So I built this website, me and this guy, Colin Chevrier. And this is before Facebook, before WordPress, before Squarespace, before all of it. And the idea was to bring the friends that I had in the DJ community, bring them onto a website.
Right.
We could host our mixes, have our community events listed, galleries, and we'd stream live radio shows.
Okay.
So it was Calgary Soul. Like it was very it was Calgary centric.
You were streaming live radio shows, did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So my buddy, Steve Chaba, Rob Stevenson's, they own this gaming place called Switchbox.
Okay.
It was like one of the early day kind of big gaming centers.
Okay.
And so they had a server infrastructure. So we could hack. Do you remember Winamp? Was like an online music media player.
Okay.
So you could hack Winamp to create this like live stream.
Oh, wow.
So we had like a pirate radio out of my buddy's server at this gaming place.
Yeah.
And people could just hit this link and listen to me DJing in my bedroom.
Oh, wow.
So Calgary, it was all about Calgary. And so like DJ Rice was on there, Rob Faust, Sideshow Sid, Alice, and they could host their mixes.
Wow.
So fast forward all these years, knowing I needed to come up with a podcast, I just kind of went back to my roots.
Yeah.
Calgary. And then what's the second word? I just went with Sessions.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like I'd done it once before. Yeah. So to come up with this idea felt very natural.
That's cool.
So that's kind of where the Calgary thing came from.
And then why do you kind of focus on artists, athletes, entrepreneurs? What's the thought there?
So those are just three types of people that I'm generally interested in hanging out with and talking to.
Okay.
The artist thing, just being a DJ, being a creative person, I like those types of people. The entrepreneur, obviously, started my own business, so that kind of fit there. And the athletic side, athletics have been a big part of my life from a very young age and continue to be. So again, just another style of person that I like hanging out with. So it's just like, who do I like being around? And I kind of make my pillars and then just kind of start finding people.
That's cool. So then why did you start a podcast? I'm always curious, like what a person's kind of inspiration was.
So I started my podcast when I decided to start my own business.
Yeah.
I knew I needed to create like a brand, have a voice in the space. And the idea was like, I didn't like holding the camera out on selfie mode and talking to it.
Right.
It's not a natural thing I can do.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to put myself in a situation where I could be on camera saying things and people could like see my fro and just like listen to my cadence and just kind of get a sense of who I am.
Yeah.
So Gary V, I've been on him since like 2007.
Yeah.
And for all these years, he's been talking about starting a podcast. It's good for long form, chop it up into little moments for social.
Yeah.
So as I know all these things. So when I started my business, I'm like, it's time to start a podcast.
Yeah.
It's going to check all the boxes that I need right now. So it was a very basic idea of just like catching myself on camera, bringing cool people into my world, like Calgary Soul, and just that was it. It was like very, very basic.
Yeah. And then so just I'm curious about kind of how you do your podcast and how you prepare, because so you do audio and video.
Yeah.
And did you start right from day one with audio and video.
Yep. So the reason I went there was just because, all the social platforms value video.
Yeah.
And then I had a bit of a tech background, and like going back to 2001, I went to this multimedia school.
Yeah.
So I learned Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere, like all of them. So when I had this idea, I knew I could be self-sufficient and turn on the video cameras, do the post-production myself, and crank this show out. So it's been video, audio in a really cool set from day one.
Yeah.
And part of that was just because having a digital storytelling business, I knew I needed the production to be at a certain level. It's kind of like a calling card, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
So that's kind of where I went over the top production to get this thing going. And then as we push forward, getting into the hundreds now, we just keep on evolving the tech, making it look cooler and cooler and sounding better. So it's just this long progression. No,
it's cool. I stalk you via Instagram, so I see it all the time. What's your preparation for podcasting? I'm always curious because for me, I'm not, and people won't necessarily know it, but I actually do prepare a lot for my podcast. I'm not the guy who can kind of wing it, and yet I know a lot of people that are really comfortable with that and are really good at it. What's your preparation look like when you're doing a podcast? So I say zero, but it's not actually zero. I know what this person does. I know that they either they're an artist, an athlete, or an entrepreneur. Right. And I kind of know what their thing is. Yeah. And that's it. So like zero prep, not knowing their like anything about their background at all. So they just sit down and I experience it for the first time. And the cool thing about that is I'm better off the cuff than I am structured. Okay. So it works really well for me. And I figured that out years ago, just like being in boardrooms and talking. And I feel like if I'm looking at something, I get distracted and I just can't let it come out. Right. Yeah. So zero prep, which is, I love it because there's no stress. There's no like pre-work. Yeah. I just sit down with them and they're saying things. And I think that the interesting thing about our show is that my reaction is very genuine. Right. I'm hearing something for the first time. And then, being a curious person, you can take it all over the place. Yeah, totally. So that's been my kind of aha. I work really well on the fly. Yeah. So it's been, So when you sent me your, like the information, like just get some like research, I was surprised. Oh, okay. Because I don't do that. Right. Right. And then like you just said, some people would be surprised that you actually put in the research because you can just, for all the conversations you're in. Yeah. I would have thought from the outside, you just sat down and been like, let's go. Yeah, I struggle with that because, there's been situations. I always think, and maybe you've had this experience where sometimes you take for granted, you think, okay, well, this one is going to be easy. Yeah. And then those ones tend to be the hard ones. And then the ones that I'm like, this is going to be like, pulling teeth. And then all of a sudden, like, those are the natural ones. Mm-hmm. And so because because if I ever try to, shoot from the hip or go from the cuff, it's like I'm always wrong. And so I just want to have some sort of like some sort of thread to go with. And then I've also been at those weddings where, the MC is like thinks that they're really funny and spontaneous and inevitably they're just terrible. Yeah. And so I've always been like, I kind of have that kind of panic attack every now and again. Mm-hmm. So I'm really fascinated by how, how people do prepare because I have a friend who helps me with the Explore 84 podcast and he's a doctor. He's very just like sit down and just like to your point. And I love watching him do that, but I'm like, I can't sit in on a podcast with him unless I'm prepared. So I'm like, even though you don't prepare, I'm like, you still need to send me all the information so that I can prepare, Totally. So, and so how many episodes have you done now? So we've recorded 104 and 99 went out right around like you and I talking. So got a couple in the bag. Nice. And so the 100th is like right around the corner. That's awesome, man. Yeah. So it's like it's become this number. Yeah. That all of a sudden you just kind of like, oh, we're here. Well, it's funny because so you introduced me to Tim and so Tim is he is doing the Pod Summit here in Calgary in 2024 and he said that for him was like the magical number was 100, and then he was then he just started to feel like he was kind of getting into flow. Did you have a magical number where you thought, okay, maybe I'm starting to get the hang of this shit?
So there's kind of like two threads here. Getting the hang of it, I found it was like episode, I can't remember who it was Laval Saint Germain.
Okay.
So I had him on the show, and before that it was like all my friends, like people I had in my phone that fit into these categories that I knew I could text and get a reaction from, like usually a yes. So Laval was the first person that was outside of my sphere.
Okay.
And Laval is the only Canadian to ever summit Everest without air. He has rowed across the Atlantic by himself in like a tricked out fiberglass rowboat.
Okay.
He's like Canadian royalty in the outdoor industry in Canada and around the world.
Yeah.
So I had him on the show. And that was a very intimidating experience.
Yeah, no doubt.
For many reasons. He's also like keynote speaker guy, so well spoken.
Yeah.
Very thoughtful. So once I kind of got out of my inner circle and got to him.
Yeah.
And I did okay. Like he actually enjoyed himself and was like proud to be on the show. That gave me a little bit of confidence.
Right.
Which was interesting. And then the other experience I had was, it's linked back to Gary Vaynerchuk again. I was part of this 4Ds program. And it's called this, and the 4Ds program is this very interesting experience where you get time with Gary Vee, so one-on-one time with Gary, and you also get time with all the senior leadership team. And the one guy that I connected with, this guy Nick Dio, he's like their VaynerMedia's brand person. So I started asking him about my podcast. When's it gonna hit? Like, when am I gonna see something out of this? He's like, dude, until you get to 100, nothing's gonna happen.
Okay.
So here you and I are.
Yeah.
Next week, whenever this airs, episode 100 goes out December 6th.
Okay, cool.
So you and I are having an experience that I would have never had before.
Right.
Here I am getting up to 100.
Yeah.
I now know you, Tim, Truex,
yeah,
tied to the Pod Summit. So all of a sudden, this conversation was like 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I always remember that conversation. Until you get to 100, nothing's going to happen.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why 100 is a magical number. There's something there. So when you were first starting, was there like, because there's a vulnerability to starting a podcast, right? Did it take you a while to kind of build up that courage to release the first one, or what was the process like for you to actually, find the courage to do it?
And that's what it is, right? It's courage.
Yeah.
Like, you and I may seem comfortable in front of cameras and mics now.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't know about you, you can answer this one, but I was like, I don't like being in group situations. I don't like the light on me.
Right.
So this was a bit of a mind twist.
Yeah.
Start to finish. But the interesting thing about this show is that version 1 of the show was called the Calgary Sessions. It was only going to be with entrepreneurs, and it was only going to be 25 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
That was V1. So I shot 2. I shot one with my good friend Chris McKinnon. He was number 1.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, he was number 2. And the first one was my good friend Jeff Moore.
Okay.
Shot them both in the same studio, same setup. Like, it still looked amazing. And then I sat on the show for 10, 11 months.
Yeah.
Didn't release anything. I had a few things working in the background I had to figure out. And as I was sitting on these 2 episodes I shot, I was like, this doesn't feel right. I cut the conversation short for whatever reason. Some people think there should be a hard stop.
Yeah.
Cut it short. And only entrepreneurs was such a niche thing that I had no business talking about. I was just starting.
Yeah.
So to me, to only talk to entrepreneurs, having my own business for like months,
okay, yeah,
didn't make a lot of sense. So then reignited the thing, and then started cranking out the episodes, artists, entrepreneurs, and athletes. So it was like a stutter start.
Totally.
So to find the courage, yes, that was kind of tricky, but it was also like to find the concept that really fit.
Yeah.
And not many people know that I've like started it and screwed up and like pulled it back and then relaunched it. So it's there's no right way to do it.
Yeah.
But that hesitation of like being on camera and putting out for the first time, I think once I wrap my head around an idea, I just kind of have enough confidence to do it and deal with whatever's going to happen.
No, 100%. It's funny because I continue to, I bet you collectively I've done over 400 episodes of all of the variations and versions of my podcast. But it's been a constant stutter step, because I've been reimagining and rethinking what, who inspires me, who do I want to talk to, how do I, because there's just, on any given day, something else might inspire you, you know what I mean? And how do you kind of fit that into your narrative? So I think that has to be baked into someone's, if they're interested in doing a podcast, the ability to experiment has to be there. It can't be rigid right off the bat, because as you as you kind of test the waters, you're gonna have different thoughts. And so if you're locked in right off the bat, you're really pigeonholing yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And then that creativity and being open to new experiences, you don't create those opportunities.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're just on this path that's kind of narrow and not that fulfilling. So
no, 100%. So your background, I want to talk about Shortline in a little bit, but what was your background? So you mentioned early 2000s you were DJing, but it seems to me you were in the hospitality industry for quite a long time too. So what's kind of your background, let's say the last 15, 20 years?
So early 2000s, went to this multimedia school, got a job at Critical Mass when I came out.
Okay, yeah.
So Critical Mass back in 2001. I was employee like 147.
Wicked.
So pretty cool place. Back then it was like this, they were doing work for Mercedes-Benz, Procter & Gamble. They were this like crazy startup from Calgary doing $1 million websites.
Yeah.
So
I remember my buddy got a job offer from them, but it was only part-time. So he declined it. I'm like, are you an idiot? Like, I'm like, dude, like,
it was a thing back then.
It's a foot in the door at Critical Mass. I'm like, you got to say yes. Yeah.
So that was kind of my good friend Chris Payne. So how long have you been in Calgary? Long?
Yeah, I went to school here in the 90s. I went to U of A for a couple years.
Yep.
I graduated there and then I came back. So I've been here since like late 90s pretty much.
So right around like 97, 98, 99, there was a school that popped up on McLeod Trail called Applied Multimedia Training Center.
Okay.
AMTC.
Yeah.
And it was this like, it was $12,000 for 12 months. And every month you learned a piece of software. Okay. And so they took you through the Adobe suite. So there's been like some of the most creative people in Calgary have went to this school. Because instead of going to ACAD and learning like theory and like, they're very talented people, but there's also a bunch of talented people that went to AMTC.
It's almost like, it seems to me like almost like a trade show for that, right?
Yep.
Which is just like, it's like, okay, give me the functional knowledge I need to know.
That's it.
Yeah.
So my good friend Chris Payne went there first, and I had dropped out of Mount Royal twice by that point, so I was like a lost soul.
Yeah.
He goes to this school, and he made this 3D rendering of an ant commercial. It was like a Raid commercial that he built 3D.
Okay.
And he showed it to me. I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm like somewhat creative. I think maybe I can do something. So I go to the school, 12 months, 12 grand, come out. Chris gets me a job at Critical Mass.
Wow.
Because they're hiring everybody they can find back then. So worked there for a bit, get laid off in the bubble. And then after I got laid off, kind of started my own little web design thing. It was called Soul Media.
Yeah.
So I did like websites for 2-3 years and then got into DJing. DJed and worked in nightclubs for 8-9 years. And then got a job at Hockey Canada. Yeah. Which is really cool because I have a deep hockey background. Okay. Worked there for almost 4 years. And then I moved from there to the restaurant world. And the restaurant world was with Franworks. Yeah. Original Joe's, State Main, Elephant Castle. So I worked there for almost 9 years. They had 100 restaurants across North America. I kind of led all the digital marketing efforts.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then started my own business. So that's like 20 years and
that's 20 years
2 minutes.
In 2 minutes, yeah. I love the slogan 12 months, 12 grand. That's just a good business like for that, yeah. So you're in what made you leave the hospitality industry, cuz it seems to me like pretty good gig. You were with a good group.
Yeah, I think everything has its
shelf life.
Yep. Yeah. And I think I'm a confident, stubborn person. Yeah. And I think I've always thought about doing my own thing. Yeah. And just like these little moments, you see somebody, you see an industry that's kind of popping off, you see somebody that's doing something like, I think I can do that. And that blind confidence of like, I think I can,
Yeah.
and I just never did it.
Which is interesting because I feel like the longer you go without actually doing it, the least likely you are to actually do it.
Yeah.
And so like you had a really good career. So it's unlikely that you would have actually like stepped out of that and become an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone was like watching what you were doing.
Yeah. So I've been wrestling with this for a long time. And I don't know if this is the place to share it with.
Yes, it absolutely is.
But this is going to catch this. This is either get me in a lot of trouble right now, or it won't. So that restaurant gig,
Yeah.
I got fired,
Okay.
and nobody knows this.
Yeah.
The staff don't know it. Nobody knows this.
Well.
There's only like 6 people in my life that know this. So for me to say this to you right now,
So now 7 because my mom's watching.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's still a small
Yeah.
little blip, but I've been wrestling with this for a while.
Yeah.
And for you to actually ask me that, I couldn't have answered it in like a very authentic way.
Right.
So the reason this is kind of like big for me to get off my chest right now is just because when I was pushed out the door, it was sold a different way,
Okay.
which is good, right? It lets me leave with like my head held high, just lets me leave properly, right?
Yeah.
And which was fine.
Yeah.
My boss was like he's a friend. He's like, he'll be maybe upset about this, but it's the way it is. So he did me a solid.
Yeah.
But that was my trigger. So I had a choice right there. Do I then start flipping my resume out,
Yeah.
or do I take what I've learned over all these years and trust this intuition that I had that I could pull this off,
Yeah.
and go in on it? And that was it.
So how many years ago was that then?
4.
4 years ago.
Yeah. So you can imagine, right? As you're asking that question,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, as you're later in life to deciding to do your own thing.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm telling you this now is because I think if there's anybody listening that is later in their life, that has been thinking about things, that maybe got fired, that got laid off or whatever, there is a way to do it.
Yeah.
It might not work, but
It might not work.
but there's why not take your swing?
100%.
So you triggered something very quickly in me that
Yeah.
I knew I needed to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because if I wasn't, it'd just be this like nonsense answer that wasn't true. So
Yeah. No, and I think that's interesting because we live like, you're born and raised Calgary, right? So I mean, we live in a city that, people, the oil and gas industry is volatile. It's
Yep.
up and down. People are getting let go all the
Yep.
time, right?
Yep.
And which is what also makes the city very entrepreneurial, right? Because it's just like but when you get that opportunity, like you said, like you had 2 choices. One was start sending your resume out, or
Yep.
it's like, hey, now is that time, right?
Yep.
So I think it's really cool that you did that. So then when that happened, you started Shortline Creative.
Yep.
Shortly thereafter.
that was it. That was my so the minute it happened, I actually went for one interview.
Yeah.
I went to this, I'm not going to name names,
Yeah.
decent sized company, kind of a national thing. Go to this interview, sit in front of their marketing person
Yeah.
in this 4-foot boardroom. And the minute I sat down, I was like, so I'm in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And had this interview that was just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I walked down the stairs out of that office. I was like, nope.
Yeah.
And then started my thing.
So what about it was uncomfortable? Because I'm really curious. I had a friend, I'll say, and I was trying to get them. I was trying to save them from having to get a corporate job.
Yep.
I was trying to give them all these opportunities, and then what I realized at a certain point was they wanted a corporate job, but that never occurred to me. I'm like, oh. People want that. I thought that was like what you did when you had no other choice. But I'm like, okay, there are people, and a lot of them, most of them,
Yep.
they want that corporate job. So for you to be in that situation where a lot of people would be like, oh, this is sweet, I'm getting my chance here, but you had the opposite reaction. So why?
It's just that that spidey sense.
Yeah.
You know, in your gut, I make a lot of moves on gut and intuition.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, like not a well-researched human. I just make these moves that just feel right.
Yeah.
And because I've been wrestling with this idea of doing my own thing for all these years, sitting across from this person interviewing me, I was just like, I'm educating him right now.
Right.
Him being, has the title of X.
Yeah.
Why am I telling him how to do all these things?
Yeah.
If he's not doing them now, well, how many other people aren't doing them now?
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I think I can help people. As soon as I realized that he wasn't up to speed in what was happening with social,
yeah,
I knew right then. I was like, okay, there's these big corporations that I thought might have had it all figured out,
yeah,
but they didn't. So I was like, oh, here's an opportunity. So that's kind of literally walking down. I can picture it like still vividly, the boardroom, and I can picture walking down those stairs and just be like, nope,
yeah,
I got this.
So did you know? Was it nope, but I got to start my own thing, or was it nope, not the right fit?
Start my own thing.
Yeah.
I was done looking on job boards. I was done. Like, I'm a horrible writer. So you imagine me like writing a cover letter and a resume tailored to each job. I was like, fuck this. This is like, I can't do it.
See, I like preparing, but I don't know if I could prepare for that. So Shortline Creative, why does it exist? I know you have the why on your website, which I think is always important. But for you, why does Shortline need to exist? Why does it exist?
I think we're rooted in the idea of giving businesses and brands a voice. That's kind of at the root of everything. And that can take you everywhere. That can be from creating content, videos, written pieces, graphics, just like having a voice in the space.
Yeah.
And also doing it in a very transparent way. So you and I talked off cam just about like different experiences in the marketing world.
Yeah.
I've been on both sides. I've been working in an agency.
Yeah. And
I've also worked for a big corporation that used agencies.
Yeah.
So I've seen both sides. And more often than not, I felt this kind of like, I didn't like the agency world.
Yeah.
Being in it was cool because I was, making money as a youngster, buying a cool car, and it was great.
Yeah.
The minute I went on the corporate side and hired agencies, I was like, this is just smoke and mirrors. And I'm not saying everybody. My experiences were like, they over promise, under deliver, and charge way too much money. That was kind of this general thing that I had felt. So our idea is like, be very transparent, listen, work on giving them a voice, and really build their brand.
Yeah.
And two words I don't like to use very often is marketing and brand.
Right.
They're like the most dirtiest words in the industry, and I feel like people have been oversold on those two ideas. And now, when you start talking to different individuals, they're like, I've tried marketing, it doesn't work, and they've had these bad experiences. So our idea is to just really listen and focus on their story, not our agenda, but their story. And I think that's different.
So when you say, two words that kind of jumped out at me. So when you say you're giving these companies a voice, or you're trying to, share their voice, like, what do you mean by that? And like, what would the difference between, say, like a company's voice and a company's brand be?
So working with a company to give them a voice, I'll use your operation as an example. It's as basic as getting every single team member on camera, talking about who they are, why they do what they do, their journey story that got them here. Yeah. That gives the organization a voice, and right beside that, it's building a brand. Right. So instead of hiding behind your logo, your colors, your fonts, your brand book, now this voice is your brand. Brand is how people feel about your organization. Okay, yeah. They don't really care about like, okay, the logo's cool. Right. The brand book looks tight. Yeah. I'm sure they paid $50,000 for that. It looks great. Yeah. But there's no feeling behind that. Right. So giving a business a voice around storytelling, then all of a sudden creates a brand. Right. So they kind of both go together. We like to lead with storytelling and voice versus talking about brand. Right. Because brand's that dirty marketing word.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I think there's a lot of preconceived notions when, like, I'll give you an example, since we're using, like, so let's use Alberta beer festivals as an example. A lot of people will say to me, well, beer festivals are this, or they are this. And what's funny is, you know, and I think we need to do a better job, to your point, of talking about like who we are, not what we are, because, you know, if they were to say come to a volunteer hangout after our festivals, you know, they would see my mom, who's 79, hanging out there playing crib with, Jason, who's been with us for 5 years, who, considers it like a second family. And there's so many people, from every age, sex, ethnicity, all together, that it doesn't even like make obvious sense. It's like, hey, how did you guys all assemble as a group?
Yep.
And so when people try to, break us down into like, you are this,
Yep.
I just think, man, like you don't know us at all, and there's such a truly like a family dynamic
Yep.
there, both, metaphorically and like literally, because
Yep.
like I said, my sisters, my cousins, my mom are all there. So,
But there's something to that, right?
yeah,
Like you telling that to me,
yeah,
I have a deeper understanding of what you're up to.
yeah,
I would never know that, right?
yeah,
And I think that, like, you come alive telling that story.
yeah,
So that just strengthens and deepens your brand.
right. Yeah.
Just by something like that.
Well, and that's what I was curious about, what the difference between brand and voice is, because I think, when people think of brand, if you were to say, what's McDonald's brand, you think of the golden arches, you think of like those sort of things, right? Hamburglar, if you're our age.
Yeah.
Good one. But like what is the voice of a company? That's a deeper question,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And what's very interesting is, you asked me this earlier off. Where does it fit? What kind of businesses does this idea fit?
Yeah.
And the answer is, it all comes down to the leadership. Do
Yeah.
they want to be transformative? Do they want to be transparent?
Yeah.
And do they really believe in this idea around brand?
Yeah.
And those are the only types of businesses that I can work with.
Yeah.
Because if I try and go sell the idea of like they want traditional,
Yeah.
I just can't do it. So it's more finding these like-minded people that have the same values and we align, and then it's an easier workflow.
Yeah. So, and I guess what's interesting is, so if someone comes to you and says, okay, well, hey, we need an agency, an agency, as you would say, but, are you interviewing them as much as they're interviewing
For
you?
sure.
Like,
For sure.
because I think there's a lot of companies that say, we want this, but you might even get a sense right off the bat that they don't actually want that.
Sure.
They're just kind of using the buzzwords and stuff. Like, do you need to see a certain level of authenticity? Have you ever decided not to work with someone, or fired someone as a client or anything like that?
It's funny. You like took me right there. So as you're asking, this is the fun part about like you and I doing like each having a show, because like I'm like go there, and then it's there. So yeah, I have fired multiple clients before we even start.
Right.
So we can be kind of through. We could be a couple emails in, just trying to feel it out. They're asking for like a scope of work or whatever, and
Yeah.
a couple of meetings face to face, a phone call, and then I don't feel it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not rude. I'm just like, I don't think I can give you what you want.
Yeah.
I think you need an organization that has these things.
Yeah.
And they're kind of confused. They're like,
They're like, I didn't know you were allowed to do that.
yeah, but it's very, you want to set yourself up for success. Me as
Yeah.
a business owner, right? Like I want to make sure that the work we put out there is appreciated, and they're proud to showcase it.
Yeah.
So why, when you decide to do your own thing, we can control these parameters.
100%.
So it takes a little, you got to be in a decent position to be able to say no.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you have experiences where it's like, you should have said no.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're down this slippery slope that sucks all your energy and all your time. And you're like, man.
Yeah, I guess if you can identify it early, it's just like, that's the 80-20 or the 90-10 rule kind of thing.
Yep.
And then your team, how did you kind of assemble the team? Like, what is because I'm always curious about, culture, and I don't know if culture is something that you can intentionally create, or if it's something you look back and be like, oh wow, somehow we ended up with a really cool team culture. But how did you kind of put together your team?
It's very, the way it came together was built off this blueprint that I kind of use for businesses that I'm working with.
Yeah.
The idea of having a voice, sharing it into the digital world, and letting people understand who you are, why you do what you do.
Yeah.
That creates inbound traffic.
Yeah.
People start digesting this content, and you start creating alignment. You might not have met this person yet, but if they're watching and listening to what you're saying online, people align with you, and then it creates inbound traffic, is how I say it.
Right.
So inbound traffic is how I built my team.
Yeah.
So I'm out there when I decided to start my business. Okay, I got to make content. I got to let people know who I am.
Yeah.
And the minute I start doing that, 10, 12, 13 months in, people start coming to me. So in the background, I'm getting DMs from Brian, who's my first employee. I mean, he's like, "Hey, I've been watching what you've been doing.
Yeah.
I'm in my master's of communication journalism. I need to find a mentor outside of school for my internship that I want to do.
Right.
Would you be interested?" Sure. And then get through the internship, and then he's with me full time.
Oh, wow.
Emma, who's helps us with the podcast, she's like a podcast. You and I enjoy podcasting.
Yeah.
She is like wildly passionate about podcasting. And so she found the show, and she was right away. She's from Calgary, lives in the UK right now. She found the show. She's like, DMs me. She's like, "I have never seen anything like this.
Really?
Do you have time to meet up for a coffee?" I was like, "Well, I don't drink coffee, but I'll meet you for a beer."
Yeah.
So
Coffee? What the fuck are you talking about?
Exactly. So put a message out there, have a voice in the space, create traffic.
Yeah.
And then Madison, who started working with us in the springtime, I was asked to speak on a panel at MRU.
Yeah.
And the panel is about speaking to students about how do you know when you're ready for the workforce.
Right.
So Madison took time out of her life, came and sat in this auditorium, listened to my nonsense.
Yeah.
And then after I was done speaking, her assistant prof or whoever it was, she came up to me. She's like, "Madison would like to talk to you. She's very interested in what you had to say." Okay. So I meet her for 5 minutes. We talk. And then fast forward a few months later, me and Brian applied for a grant, a student.
Yeah.
There's Madison in my phone. So I'm like, "Would you be interested in working with us for 2 or 3 months and helping us with our PR and communications?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'd love to."
Yeah.
So it's just it's clinical how it's happening. There's no real plan to it. The only plan is have a voice, be out there, be authentic.
Yeah.
And it just creates traffic.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. So you mentioned mentorship. So do you have mentors? So we met. The first time we met, I believe, was at Village when Terry Andreo introduced us.
Yep.
I would consider Terry to be one of my mentors. Do you have mentors that have helped you kind of get to where you are?
I haven't been smart enough to ask the brilliant people in my life for formalized form of mentorship.
Yeah, no, me neither. I realized one day, I'm like, oh yeah, these guys, and if I could ever get back to it, I just always feel like I'm out of town when this is happening. But Terry does his walks, right? And he used to walk with Jim Button, yep. and so just by being with those, Bob Sumner would be another one that I would put in there as a mentor.
Do these people know that? Does Terry know that?
I think so. Yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've since sat down and articulated that I consider him a mentor. And I think that he's and that actually was interesting because it kind of changes the dynamic a little bit in that then they start giving you more kind of structured advice.
Yep.
You know what I mean? When you kind of you articulate that's you realize, because I was thinking about that one time. Someone asked me, "Do you have a mentor?" And I'm like, "Not really." And then I thought, "Oh wait," and I was thinking about all these people who I would go for walks with, or I'd bring for a coffee and go for lunch, but I'd be asking them things, and they'd have these really cool perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And so, but at that point, I would have answered it the same as you, as not really, but I have these cool people that I get to bounce ideas off.
That's it. And that's exactly what I think. But what's really interesting is the idea of mentorship. For me, so I had one of my guests on the show. His name is Ryan Smith.
Yeah.
So Ryan Smith was a 3-time Canadian, played on the Canadian World Cup rugby team.
Okay.
Captain, I think he was the captain of the last one. So played 3 World Cups, captain of the last one. Owns this company called 360, kind of clean energy, sustainability.
Okay.
Just a spectacular human, a super accomplished athlete, talented business person.
Yeah.
And we just like had a connection on the show.
Yeah.
And we've gone for beers once after that. And he was on me about this. And he alluded to the fact, he's like, if you need a mentor, you know, let me know.
Yeah.
And I'm just not smart enough to, or I don't know what I'm missing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to approach it. So it's just a gray zone for me right now, but I feel like I'm missing an opportunity.
I feel like that would be like if a girl was like asking you if you had a girlfriend and like, well, if you ever want, like, he's kind of like saying, hey, maybe I could be your mentor. Yeah. That's what I'm picking up on that.
And then it's just, then it's crossing over this threshold of like podcast guest, friend with mutual connections to this new territory, right?
Yeah.
So me, I'm like a very slow moving, like very like internal thinker.
Yeah.
So here I am, like, this was in the summertime we had this conversation. So this is like 5 months ago. I'm just like, still thinking about it.
Yeah, still.
Do you the mentorship piece, do you, the other angle is obviously the younger generation.
Yeah.
Does that occupy space in your brain at all?
About being a mentor?
Yeah.
Not really, in that I still feel like I'm still needing to kind of figure shit out myself. Mm-hmm. But like I would never, there's more than two types of people, but let's pretend there's two types of people. Yeah. There's like, I'm still I'm really curious about how people get shit done and how they do things and what their processes are. I'm not quite ready to turn that around and be like, here's how it works. Like, you know what I mean? I don't feel comfortable in that. Whereas other people I see, you know, they feel comfortable like maybe naturally they feel comfortable in that, or they have just gotten to a point in their lives where now they're like, okay, I have a few things that I can share with people. Yep. I'm just not quite there specifically, but I would like to someday for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The few experiences I've had talking in front of students has been very, very interesting. Just that MRU example, I was on a panel and there was four of us on the panel, and then the associate dean was the moderator. I had no idea what I was walking into. I was just like, yeah, I'm happy to like come up and talk. Yeah. No prep, just showing up. Yeah. And the first person was a recent grad. She was like she had her degree in business or something. Yeah. The person beside me was like 2 degrees, something, super smart guy, worked in some big company. Me, 3-time dropout. And then the guest beside me had her MBA. Yeah. And here I am. And there's students in the crowd, and these questions are going around, and these students are asking questions to me, like.
See, you were really there just so that they could say, and that's why you should stay in school.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. I was that person. But it was just after that panel discussion, one of the students came up to me, and he's like, thank you. He's like, I'm having a really tough time right now, and you talking to me and helping me work through this was like, I really appreciate it. Oh, wow. And I was just like, oh, that's just me being like explaining my kind of way I'm navigating this world. Yeah. And it actually connected with this youngster. So that was refreshing. Yeah. And the reason I found that refreshing was because when I was growing up, I always felt lost.
Oh, totally.
Like high school, going to see that like guidance counselor. What are you going to do with yourself? Well, I'm just trying to get like over 55 in my classes. Yeah. I'm not sure what the plan is. Yeah. And being a creative person, you know, I graduated in 94. Being a creative person back then, there wasn't many paths. There was like ACAD was kind of a thing, but I wasn't smart enough to go there. Yeah. So, you know, the idea of starting your own business was not really a thing. So I was always lost. Yeah. So to see that in today's generation being lost, and me just with a different perspective, MBA, 2 degrees, recent grad, dropout. Yeah. Maybe my message is a little bit different. Yeah. I'm not saying drop out. I'm just saying look at things differently.
Did they have that on the plaque in front of you? Like everyone had like...
No, you know what's hilarious? So start this thing off, and I'm like, the dean's like, okay, the associate dean, he's like, please introduce yourself. And I'm just, I know what's going to happen. These people are going to just rattle off their resumes. Yeah. And so it's my turn. So I'm like, well, I forget the person's name that found me online. I'm like, I think Steve didn't do his research very well because I'm a 3-time dropout of this school.
Oh, wow.
And the whole...
Oh, of that specific school.
Yeah.
That's
So everyone,
awesome.
everyone starts laughing. But yeah, I think it's just... The takeaway of that discussion was different. There's a different way to go about it.
Yeah.
And different doesn't mean drop out. Different means like trying things, like creating experiences.
Yeah.
And then trusting what you're feeling and going down that path.
Absolutely. Even though, you know, I think you said it earlier, it might not work out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, most paths that you go down aren't actually going to work out.
Yeah.
Like, and you gotta just kind of keep doing it. Did you find one of the things that I have found helpful is through podcasting is it's helped me better articulate myself and better, you know, I guess the term would be kind of finding your voice, right? So then when you're in that situation, because I think there's a tendency to, you know, and I'm generalizing here, of course, but if you're if you have a double degree or you're an MBA or whatever, you feel like you're supposed to have certain talking points and you're supposed to speak a certain way.
Yep.
Whereas, you know, through podcasting, I've found that I can answer things candidly and comfortably.
Yep.
But whereas maybe before I started podcasting, I would have stuttered or answered the way that the facade of what I'm supposed to be is supposed to answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
did you feel more comfortable because of the podcasting?
It's practice, right?
Yeah.
This airtime, listening and talking and being very thoughtful about what you're saying because it's getting recorded and getting posted to the public. Those are like real skills that when you're 400 deep, 100 deep, like you're getting better at something.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get thrown in these situations, and whether you're on stage or hosting something or on these panels, you do have your talking points.
Yeah.
You've said it enough and you've been getting enough reactions that you can trust what you think is real.
Yeah.
And that just because you don't have specific things behind your name or different experiences, what you think and how you articulate it has value.
Yeah, no, I agree. Random question just about your podcast. How much do you, like the conversation you have with people, do you edit a lot of it out?
Nothing.
Yeah, so I stopped doing that. I don't edit almost anything out unless you go on like a racist rant, which I don't see that happening anytime soon. No, but like I really don't edit anything out. But the reason I chose to stop doing that, the editing, is because I found that I was relying on that too much. Like where it'd be like, you know, okay, I can re-ask that question and we can reboot. And then it's this very unnatural conversation that you're having. And
which is, like your point earlier, just how this is like this evolution, right? It's like the stutter, stop, go. But yeah, I think what's really important is just being very thoughtful of and trusting what you're feeling. Yeah. And when you're feeling like, this isn't, to have the courage to then make that change, I think is really important. And for me, I didn't want to invest the time in post-production to cut things out. I wanted to kind of make this quick and dirty intro, outro, meet, and then out the door.
Totally.
But I think, you know, in my experience, there's been a couple of whoopses that I had to do a quick little edit. And I mean like a 2.5 second edit. Yeah. The funniest edit I ever did was with my buddy Kurt. Down from Bo Cycle.
Okay, yeah.
Kurt Christensen, KC. Yeah. So I had him on the show. He's like, no, I asked him for months. No. He's like, finally, yes. So he comes on the show. Nervous. This is a guy that's one of the most talkative, outgoing.
Don't you find that funny though? Because like sometimes like when someone says no, I feel like they're just rejecting me. Like, no, it's not worth my time. It doesn't occur to me until they get there when they finally say yes, is that they're actually self-conscious and nervous, because it's the people that are like, what are you talking about? Like, you're amazing. You shouldn't be self-conscious at all.
But the minute you like lights, cameras, mics, the most confident person can just like
shrink. Yeah.
So Casey on the show, I knew he's like, dude, and this is like the day before, I'm so nervous. So he rides his bike there. So I had a 4-pack of Fat Tug beers. Yeah. On ice, off camera, beside his chair. Yeah.
Just crushing.
So halfway through the show, he's sitting across from me. He's like, I was like, and I know I don't edit, right? Yeah. So I'm like, so what do you tell me about like whatever? And he's like, I'm like, what? He's like, dude, I gotta go to the bathroom. So he gets up, goes to the bathroom, comes back and sits down. We finish it. So the edit was on the show, on the video component. I just put in like that, remember the back in the day and those TV channels that had the lines?
Yeah.
So I just put like TV time out.
Yeah.
And that was the edit.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I think it's been lucky enough that the people that have been on have been like thoughtful and well spoken.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yep.
You mentioned Gary V a couple of times
Yep.
on this, and I know with having beers with you a few times now, you've mentioned him in our conversations as well. So there's mentors, and then there's business heroes, or just people you look up to. So
Yep.
What is it about Gary V that resonates with you? Because I think some people see him and they just see this like
Yep.
obnoxious guy yelling at the camera.
And that was my first experience with him.
Yeah.
So back in like 2007. So 2007, I was at Hockey Canada. Socials just starting to get going. Facebook was like 05 or 04 or something.
Yeah.
There was nothing else. So there's a bunch of characters back then. Gary Vee was one of them. This guy, David Merriman, Chris Brogan. Those are kind of the three people that I was on.
Yeah.
And I was on them just like just listening and learning what they're talking about. Gary was very abrasive, very loud, and obnoxious. And then I bought his first book called Crush It. I don't read. I got like 3 books in my library, and they're all 3 his. And he was very, like I said, very obnoxious. But he started getting very tactical.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, he's got the blueprint. So he literally was saying what's happening in the social world, how to leverage it, how to buy ads, how to target things. So what I did at Hockey was I built this 50-page job proposal.
Yeah.
2009. And the job was social media manager. Never been like thought about in many places.
Right.
It was all because of Gary Vee. He's been talking about it. He's been like talking about digital. So, and over the years, he's just given me all these ideas. And people, if you can sift through his moments of like loudness, he's telling you exactly how to do things.
Yeah.
And if he's not telling you, but you watch how he operates, he's giving you all the answers.
Yeah, he's showing you.
That's it. So it's like he has been this. And then when I got to meet him face to face, like on a camera, I was like, well, this is intimidating.
Yeah.
But he said to me, like, which was really cool. So this is like FaceTime. He's like, bro, you got this. He's like, you are so into me, what I'm up to. Just go do it.
Yeah.
And this like weight just kind of like fell off of me. I was like, okay, I can trust this.
That's cool.
So he is brash. He is loud. But he's all about attention, and the conversation changes based on what he's feeling and the DMs that he's getting. So when he's talking about kids not going to school and that the school system's broke, it's because he's receiving this large amount of information from people saying that's how they feel. Then he starts talking about it. He never really like leads with these obscure things. He listens for a long amount of time and then has something to say. Okay. He listens, researches it, and then does something, which most people don't understand. That's actually what he's really doing. So in the business world, in my space, doing this unagency and focus on digital and storytelling, he's the only person that I've ever listened to. So you ask about mentor. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, he's like this obscure mentor that he knows because I thanked him face to face, but he really doesn't know how much of an impact he's had on my life. Yeah,
no, that's interesting. Doesn't he have a weird origin story? Like, wasn't it like a wine?
Yep.
Didn't him and his dad have like a wine agency or wine store or something like that?
Yeah, so I think his parents are from like Belarus.
Okay.
They came to New York, lived in Jersey. Dad worked at a liquor store and then bought the liquor store. And then like super, like this is, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And then Gary started working in the store as a 17, 18-year-old. Took the store from like 3 million sales to 60.
Wow.
And just by, he started running ads on Google. Yeah. He was buying the word wine and nobody was doing that. Yeah. And then he had like an e-newsletter back in the day. He was very aware of the customer flow through the wine store. Yeah. So he's very thoughtful of like where people's eyes would go and he'd put signage there. So he's just this master of attention and awareness.
Yeah, just observation.
Yeah,
eh?
yeah. And sometimes the loudest people are actually listening.
Yeah.
They're not just like megaphoning it. They're actually listening and reacting. Yeah. but sometimes it's tough to like sift through that when they're really that loud.
It is tricky, but it's kind of fun though. Like I think you were saying with that is like, there was a part of why you started watching him was because he was obnoxious. And sometimes it's like one of those like, cause if I say to myself, I don't like that person.
Yep.
I'll be like, okay, but I'm going to just watch this just to prove to myself that I don't like that person. So I did that with Guy Fieri.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when my kids were first born and you're sitting on a couch with a newborn and you're stuck there for like hours, right? And I'm watching the Food Network and I'm like, oh, fuck, I hate that guy. He's such a dork. And then so I would watch it. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to watch an episode just to prove that I hate him.
Yeah.
And then I was watching and I'm like, oh, he's so funny. I'm like finding myself laughing at his jokes. I'm like, oh shit. And then there's like these like diners, drive-ins and dives or whatever, like marathons. And now I'm like 8 deep, right? And I'm like, so it's just funny how like, there's this like craziness to these people. But then when you look at what they do, when you kind of get over that, there is a passion and there's like an authenticity, right? And so I knew like Gary Vee, I'm like, I think he comes from a successful background. He's not just yelling to get attention. He's actually, like you said, he's giving you the tools that he used to get to where he was, right?
Yeah, which is, now he has a sports agency, he has his digital marketing agency. He has so many things going on.
Yeah.
And it's all built around what he's talked about all these years.
Yeah.
And very humble beginnings. Even when he started his agency, he started out in his buddy's boardroom. Like, if you actually listen, like you said, once you actually like really listen, like, okay, give this person a chance.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Yeah. 100%.
But then you got to be able to, you can't copy it, right? You got to take it and twist it into your own format.
100%. Yeah. That's the biggest thing is just like, you can't out Gary Vee. Don't even try.
Yep.
Just, you got to be who you are. And that sounds cheesy maybe, but it's so true.
Yep.
Like if you've ever seen someone trying to be someone else, it's just like, dude, like it's not cool. So going back to your podcast for a second, what's your vision for your podcast? Like, where would you like to see it in, a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever your timeline is?
I think I don't see it. I'm just going to keep doing it. Yeah. And the reason, I don't know what it's going to, like the production value is always going to be tweaked. It's always going to get cooler and cooler. Yeah. But as far as where it's going to go, how it's going to get there, I feel like I'm just going to keep doing it. Yeah. And I think it's endless, the amount of people that I can talk to in Calgary. Yeah. Just like, there's so many spectacular humans in our city that the idea of struggling to find an artist, entrepreneur, or athlete, I don't think I'll ever have that problem. So the passion to actually, and this is, I will ask you this. The only difficult part about doing this is the energy exchange. Okay, yeah. I find it's a very exhausting day to shoot 2 in a day. Yeah. To go set up the studio, record one, next guest comes in, record, tear down, and pack it out. Yeah. And then all the post-production on the weekend. Like it's this cycle that is very difficult. Yeah. And I think that's the one piece I have to figure out how to manage, that energy output. Yeah. And the amount of work behind the scenes to pull it off. I have to figure out how to scale better. Oh yeah. Or else I'm in trouble. Yeah, yeah. That's the key is this. Everything is, yeah. You got to figure out how to scale things. Yeah. That's the magical question, right? Is like because is it sustainable if you need to be able to create a good team, like with anything, right? Like it's the African proverb of, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go as a team. Mm. So to build the right team that can do that is in everything is like the hardest thing, 100%. So then one thing that I was asking Tim yesterday, which is rad that he was yesterday. Yeah, like, so cool. Yeah, I hope that your guys' podcasts get released sequentially, or this will make no sense. But so and I see this in other kind of things that I'm doing, but in terms of like podcasting and then creating podcast communities, because so he's doing, like the summit, and the three of us got together to talk about that. I think on some level people might think, well, what's the point of like us all talking to each other about our podcast? Like, is it mm-hmm. Some people would look at it as a zero-sum game. Like the more people listening to my podcast means the fewer people listening to your podcast, mm-hmm. which means I win and you lose. Mm-hmm.
And so where do you sit with that in terms of like creating a podcast community? Why do you, because you clearly think that building a community is more important than doing it in a silo.
Yep.
So why is that?
Dude, I'll flip this on its head, but like right in your lap. Think about the craft beer community.
Right.
If everything was siloed, and if people thought about like competition is going to steal from me,
right,
then all of a sudden nothing grows, right? You have this very small audience.
Yeah.
So if the idea is to grow a community and build, you want more exposure.
Yeah.
And so if there's more people doing that, and everyone's different, it's got a different voice, then what's the harm? I think the people that feel like it's a negative are the ones that don't look at our city or even an industry as abundant.
Yeah.
I think if you look at it as like, you're a competitor.
Yeah.
Your ears are taken away from potential ears on my show.
Yeah.
Well, not really.
Not really, no.
There's so I'm so Calgary centric, whatever that is, the population, 1,000,000, 4 or 5, whatever the number is, like there's lots of ears.
Yeah.
So why not build a true community with like-minded people and just make this thing bigger? Because me by myself, you by yourself cannot lift an industry.
Right.
It's got to be this like ground swell of energy to push it forward.
Yeah.
So the Tim Truex, like for him to have the courage to start this, to take over this summit and be very thoughtful of how he's going to launch this and what the conversations will be. Dude, for people like you and me in this spot, as like good people that have been whatever successful means in the podcast world.
Yeah.
And I just being consistent.
Yeah.
To have somebody like that pushing this idea forward, dude, that's a huge opportunity for us. And I'm pumped that you got to meet him. I'm pumped that he looped me into his world. So yeah, I think what he's doing around community is exactly what you're doing in the beer community.
Cool. Well, I hope so, because I love what I do in the beer community. So
did you feel like that though? Like you've been around the craft beer world for so long, and that idea of like stealing market share. There's some breweries that are probably secretive and don't want to do it, and the other ones are like open armed, and it just pushes this whole industry up. Like
and I think like I've been lucky enough to kind of be there especially in Alberta, when we first started, like we've been doing festivals for 20 years. So when we first started, there's very few craft breweries. There were still really good ones, but very few. And so we've watched this whole kind of community come up. And so we've been lucky enough to be a part of that. And I think, the ones that, when they really give a shit, they're so happy to help each other. I've seen it so many times where, one guy is going to a brewery because he's out of barley, and like they're all helping each other. A good example that I have in that industry, I just think is the coolest thing, is there's two. I was telling the story when I was in Jasper a couple weeks ago, but there's two breweries in Medicine Hat, and one was like during COVID, one was like very, very small, had no ability to can their product. And then there's another brewery there that's quite a bit larger. And so this smaller company was kind of like fucked, right? Like, because their tap room was shut down. Like no one could come and hang out there. So they really had no means of distributing their product. So the big company could have said, okay, cool, I'll wait till you close and I'll buy your equipment for 10 cents on the dollar. And they invited them to come and can all their product, which effectively kept their competition alive, right? But that to me is like, because you hear about things in certain industries where it's like, oh yeah, we're all friends here. It's like, okay, but when push comes to shove, are you friends? Do you do the right thing? And I see that example happen time and time again in that industry. And so I just see like that's a better way to live than to be like, okay, I'll wait till you die and I'll buy all your shit off you, right? Like that's.
And I think there's lots of people that do that though too.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's a lot of industries that would do that. So I just think like, because the podcasting industry in Calgary and Canada is still so much in its infancy, like if we can implement that sort of culture into it, inject that culture, that's the one that I would rather be a part of for sure. Yeah,
and I think track record. You have a track record. I'm starting to have one. I think you just start creating alignment. You start bringing like-minded people into your world. Yeah, and I think those connections and that community can then push this thing forward. So I think it's, I'm excited to be in that circle.
No, it's so much fun. So, hey man, thanks for sharing your story. I'll let you get back to, I'm sure you got other shit to do than hang out and drink beer with me.
Dude, this is pretty simple.
But do you see, I brought, because I know that your favorite beer is the Tail Gunner. I think that's what we were drinking when we were there. The Welcome.
Yeah, you did really good.
I do what I can.
Thoughtful guy.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks for coming.